My name is Emma, and ever since I made the decision to leave high school, I have dedicated myself entirely to my work. There was something burning inside me that I just had to pursue. Despite their concerns, my parents stood by me and supported my choice. I owe so much of where I am today to their unwavering encouragement. Lately, they've shared with me their thoughts of potentially letting go of our family home, a place steeped in history passed down from my grandparents. Though it's been updated over time, the wear and tear of many years is starting to show. With my parents aging, they're contemplating a move to a more accessible apartment and the possibility of saying goodbye to our beloved family house. As I came to terms with the reality of our aging family home, I suggested to my parents that we find a new place to live together. I acknowledged that my own life might take me in different directions, possibly towards marriage, but I wanted to repay my parents for their unwavering support while still honoring the choices I made in my youth. And so we made the transition to a new apartment. This new space offered us more rooms than our old house, and its elevated position delighted my parents with its panoramic views and the added bonus of a hobby room. As we settled into our new home, enjoying the peace and harmony of our shared space, I received an unexpected call from my younger sister, Jane, a relationship strained by her lingering disapproval of my past decisions, particularly my choice to leave high school. "Why are you quitting high school, Emma?" Jane's voice dripped with disdain. "I don't want any of my friends to find out that my sister dropped out of high school because it's embarrassing. From now on, pretend we don't know each other." Despite attending different high schools, Jane seemed to regard my decision to leave as a stain on her reputation. With her nose perpetually pointed upwards, attending a more prestigious school, she never missed a chance to belittle me. Her favorite refrain, "Emma is stupid," echoed through our conversations, each insult eroding my confidence a little more. Her words cut deep as she mocked my ambitions, taunting, "There's no way you're going to succeed in what you want to do. You can't even understand that, Emma, because you're stupid." Enduring Jane's constant barrage of criticism became unbearable. Every day felt like a battle as she reminded me of the disappointment I brought upon our parents. Exhausted and fed up, I resolved to forge my own path. As soon as I started earning money from part-time jobs after dropping out of high school, I packed my bags and left home, determined to prove Jane wrong. 10 years had passed since then, and in that time, Jane had also departed from home. Our once tenuous connection had dwindled to nothing, and even as she embarked on her college journey solo, her ties to our parents grew increasingly faint. When the decision arose to demolish our family home, my parents sought input not only from me but also from Jane. Yet her response was curt and indifferent. "I don't care about that old house. Do whatever you want." My parents were left bewildered, grappling with the question of why Jane had become so distant. Then, out of the blue, a call came from Jane, catching them off guard. As my mother recounted, Jane had taken the plunge into marriage without so much as a word to our parents. "So you've chosen a condo, huh? Well, bring your husband over sometime. We'd love to meet him and see your new place," my mother offered, her voice laced with a mixture of surprise and anticipation. With those words, Jane's marital status was suddenly laid bare. My parents, caught completely off guard, reacted with surprise, while Jane herself brushed off the revelation casually, as if it were a trivial detail she had forgotten to mention. What struck us as particularly odd was Jane's apparent lack of intention to hold a wedding ceremony. This seemed out of character for someone who had always been enamored with the idea of a fairy tale wedding. Ever since she was a little girl, she had often shared her dreams of being a princess and described in detail the dress she envisioned wearing on her big day. It was perplexing that she would forego such a cherished tradition. I couldn't help but speculate of the reasons behind this decision. Perhaps financial constraints played a role, but Jane quickly dispelled that notion by revealing that her husband worked alongside her at the prestigious company where she was employed. This only added to the mystery surrounding Jane's sudden marriage. Finally, the day arrived when Jane and her husband paid a visit to our parents' home. As they entered, Jane's husband, with polite formality, complimented the spacious and immaculate rooms, while Jane wasted no time in eagerly exploring every nook and cranny. Despite the familiarity of her childhood surroundings, Jane's husband, Scott, exuded a youthful charm, sporting an expensive timepiece that caught the light with every movement of his wrist. Yet, despite his polished appearance, he avoided meeting our gaze, an air of detachment surrounding him. After exchanging introductions with our parents, Scott wasted no time in exploring the rooms with the same unrestrained curiosity as Jane. Your parents have quite the place here. The location is perfect. And there's even a shopping mall nearby. You guys lucked out, he remarked. Yeah, we're really grateful. Emma played a big part in finding this place, my mother chimed in, offering a warm smile in my direction. It was nothing, I replied modestly, but Jane couldn't resist the urge to make a cutting remark. Really? You have an older sister. I didn't even notice. With such a beautiful and lavish home, I would have expected someone more impressive, she sneered. Emma is not freeloading, my father attempted to interject, but Jane brushed him off, gesturing towards me and beckoning Scott over. Hey Scott, come here. Can you believe this is my sister? This is the one you've been hearing about, she said, her tone dripping with disdain. I didn't recognize her because you two look nothing alike. As Jane and Scott launched into their mockery, I stood there speechless and stung by their words. My mother's reproachful tone broke through the tension. What on earth are you saying? She scolded Jane, but her words fell on deaf ears. My sister didn't even finish high school. She's not the sharpest tool in the shed. There's a world of difference between us, you know, those of us who actually graduated from a state university. Jane continued, her words laced with superiority. The revelation that Jane's sister hadn't completed high school hit me like a punch to the gut, and it seemed Jane had no qualms about airing this perceived inadequacy to Scott. If she harbored such embarrassment about having someone like me in her family, it was no wonder she felt the need to distance herself. With laughter still lingering in the air, Jane and Scott stepped into my room, their conversation flowing uninterrupted. And then, oh, Jane exclaimed, gesturing towards the walls adorned with comic books. What's with all these comic books? It's kind of creepy. Are you still into that nerdy stuff? My room served as a sanctuary for my passion, comic book art. Each wall was adorned with colorful panels and characters, a testament to my dedication to the craft. Jane, with her distaste for such subcultures, couldn't comprehend my fascination. She was the outgoing type, whereas I found solace in the world of comics. Just as she couldn't fathom my introverted nature and love for comics, I struggled to understand her penchant for heavily applied mascara. Well, I'm a comic book artist. These are all my references, I explained, standing proudly amidst my collection. You're probably not even a successful comic book artist, are you? Still mooching off mom and dad, it's disgraceful. Just get out already, Jane sneered, her words dripping with disdain. Perplexed by her sudden hostility, I stammered. What? Just leave. Scott and I are taking over this house, Jane declared, her tone final. What? Jane, we haven't discussed any of this, both mother and father exclaimed in disbelief. But Jane paid their shock no mind, laughing derisively. Scott and I will look after mom and dad. You're not needed here anymore, so just go. Aren't you embarrassed to still be relying on them? You're not just ugly, you're stupid, she taunted, eliciting a chuckle from Scott. Fighting back my rising anger and my mother's protests, I swallowed my pride and replied, fine. Jane and Scott's brazen behavior had not only stirred up turmoil among my parents, but it had ignited a fierce anger within me as well. I refused to let them off the hook. Reluctantly, I decided to comply with Jane's demand. Fine, I'll pack up and move out in a few days. You and Scott can have the place to yourselves. But don't expect a penny from me, I declared, my voice firm with resolve. Whatever, sis. Just make sure you're out soon, Jane replied dismissively as they prepared to depart. With their parting words ringing in my ears, my parents tried to reassure me. There's no need for you to leave, but fueled by my determination for revenge, I insisted, no, I'm leaving. I already have a place lined up. And true to my word, I wasted no time in making my exit. Jane and Scott wasted no time in settling into our family home. On the day of their move, Jane's voice came through the phone, eager and impatient. Have you moved out yet? She inquired. I'm in the process of leaving now. Don't worry, I responded, feeling a tinge of frustration in my tone. While Jane always maintained a facade of politeness towards our parents, she often showed a different side when it came to discussing me with them. Despite being cherished daughters to our parents, Jane and I seemed to exist in two separate worlds. Our parents had expressed their hurt over hearing Jane's disparaging remarks about me, but it appeared that Jane and Scott remained indifferent to their concerns. Then, just as I had anticipated, a month later, the inevitable call from Jane came. As I answered the phone, bracing myself for what was to come, I heard Jane's voice on the verge of tears. Emma, the property management company for the apartment, just called me. They haven't received the rent. What's happening? They even threatened to evict us if we continue to fall behind. Why should I pay rent? I don't live there anymore, do I? I heard from Mom and Dad that you were covering the rent as a gesture of gratitude to them. Why the sudden halt? Jane's voice came through the phone, a mixture of accusation and entitlement. As I've said, I don't reside there, so I'm not obligated to foot the bill. Just get the money sorted. The utility bills are skyrocketing too, I retorted, growing increasingly disgusted with Jane's persistent nagging. With a huff, I ended the call and dialed my boyfriend, Liam. Jane wants me to come over. I'm heading to her parents' house. I informed him, my frustration evident in my tone. Okay, I'll join you. I've been concerned about you, Emma, and it's been too long since I've seen your parents, Liam replied, his voice filled with genuine care. Following my departure from my parents' home, Liam had generously offered me a place to stay. As we contemplated the possibility of marriage, this past month had served as a valuable trial period for us. Accompanied by Liam, I arrived at my parents' house. As I reached for the door, it swung open, revealing Jane, her face flushed with anger. Did you bring the money? It's only right to pay our dues and show gratitude to our parents, she demanded, her tone sharp with irritation. Do you think I'm just a struggling cartoonist, Jane? How do you expect me to afford rent for such a luxurious apartment? I challenged, my frustration simmering. Well, I don't know, but you've been managing to pay it so far, haven't you? Please just pay the rent and the bills, Jane retorted stubbornly, her tone defensive. I refuse, I shot back, turning to face both Jane and Scott. You both work for reputable companies, don't you? Why can't you cover your own expenses? I pressed, noticing Jane's hesitation, which hinted at a lack of funds. Jane was clad in designer attire from head to toe, and Scott sported an expensive-looking watch, their outward appearances suggesting financial stability. Isn't it the case that Jane and Scott can't afford the rent, rather than simply choosing not to? I pointed out. You claimed you wanted to take care of Mom and Dad, yet I've heard you've left all the household chores to Mom. Aren't you and Scott just living off of them? My words struck a nerve with Jane, who bit her lip in discomfort. Scott, his gaze fixed on Liam rather than me, responded with a trembling voice. Why is Liam here? Scott's voice held a note of surprise, while Jane's expression remained unreadable. Liam, who had been observing the exchange with a concerned expression, then stepped forward with a friendly smile. Hello there. Yes, as you may already know, I'm dating Emma with the intention of marrying her, he introduced himself calmly. What? Emma and Liam are dating? What's going on? Scott's tone was incredulous, his confusion evident as he turned to Jane for clarification. Don't you know? He's a voice actor from that anime that caused such a stir in society. You've probably seen him on TV, Jane explained casually. What? Why is my sister dating someone like him? Scott's agitation was palpable. It's because Emma is the talented artist behind the original story for that socially influential anime, Jane revealed matter-of-factly. As Liam gently explained my accomplishments, Jane's expression shifted from disbelief to shock. In reality, I had a successful series in a boys' magazine, which had garnered widespread acclaim, becoming a societal phenomenon. Even Jane, who wasn't particularly knowledgeable about comics, recognized the title and paled, seemingly regretting her past underestimations of me. With Jane now aware of my financial success, I couldn't help but sigh at her sudden change in attitude. Addressing Jane and Scott, I spoke firmly, if you can't afford the rent, then it's time for you to leave. I'll be expecting the 1 month's rent from you later. Don't say that, Scott interjected hastily. We got caught up in gambling and ended up losing a lot of money. It emerged that Jane and Scott had become entangled in gambling, squandering their funds on slot machines. Their decision to move in with their parents was driven by financial hardship, exacerbated by borrowing money from dubious sources. Most of their earnings were being funneled into repaying these debts, a revelation that left me reeling with shock. I have no intention of aiding Jane, who has continually belittled me. Our parents are relocating, so it's time for you and Scott to vacate immediately. I won't tolerate any further burdens on Mom and Dad. Why are they moving? So you two won't come running to them in need? I can easily envision debt-ridden Jane causing further strife for our parents. If you don't depart promptly, I'll have no choice but to charge you for the second month's rent as well, I declared firmly, leaving no room for negotiation. Reluctantly, Jane and Scott acquiesced with a begrudging okay, and the tense gathering disbanded. Later, my parents, who had been absent during the confrontation, reached out to Liam to extend their apologies. But Liam seemed unperturbed. Perhaps it's best to steer clear of Jane for a while, he suggested calmly, and focus on finding a new place for my parents to settle. With resolve, I swiftly purchased a new apartment and preparations began for my parents to relocate once again. I'm sorry for the trouble, my parents expressed, their voices laden with remorse. It's only right to repay the kindness you both showed me when I made the drastic decision to drop out of high school. I owe everything to your support, I replied earnestly, moved to tears by their unwavering love and encouragement. Despite my parents' emotional reaction, Jane and Scott continued to struggle with their debts. However, I felt no obligation to show them mercy. Therefore, I insisted on full repayment for the rent and utilities I had covered on their behalf. Despite my demands, Jane and Scott failed to repay the money and ceased responding to my calls. Determined to recoup what was owed, I contacted their workplace directly, eventually securing the payment. Unfortunately, this exposed Jane and Scott's financial struggles to everyone at their company, leaving them feeling uncomfortable and exposed. In the midst of these challenges, Liam and I embarked on a new chapter together, eventually tying the knot with the blessings of our parents. Despite severing ties with Jane and Scott as blood relatives, I harbored no ill will towards them and wished them strength and resilience in their endeavors. As for Liam and me, we have found happiness and fulfillment in our shared life together.